this is going to be fun. Hey everybody, I'm Joe, and today I'm here to talk about the long-awaited Star Wars Episode 9, The Rise of Skywalker. And spoiler warning if you haven't seen this already. It's been out for a little bit, so I would imagine that a good amount of people have seen it by now, but if you still haven't seen it, we're gonna go into spoilers. Ye be warned. So what did I think of The Rise of Skywalker? Well, if you follow me on social media, you could probably guess what my verdict is. And I'm saying this with all the understanding that I have for other people's opinions out there, because the consensus, well, there really is no consensus. It is literally all over the place. But it's Star Wars fandom. What else are you expecting? And this is coming from a fan base that spent so many years not only bullying George Lucas and Jake Lloyd and Hayden Christensen, and the same people who continue to bully Rian Johnson. Regardless of what you thought of The Last Jedi, people to this day still trash him on Twitter. I'm gonna try not to stay on my soapbox for too long, but my point is, I was very hesitant to talk about this because the Star Wars fan base is so toxic. It's really not as fun to talk about Star Wars anymore, because it seems like everybody either hates this new sequel trilogy or doesn't think it's that good. This is the same group of fans that trashed George Lucas for years over the special editions and the prequels. Did he make the greatest decisions with the prequel trilogy? No, not necessarily, but he did not deserve to get crapped on by you guys. Him selling Star Wars was basically him saying to the fans, okay, clearly you guys don't care about my vision, screw you. And yet people wish they knew what he would have wanted to do with the sequel trilogy. What is the matter with you guys? What is wrong with you?
Look at what you sunk to! Look at what you've become! Look in the mirror! You need help!
I apologize, I'm going off track. What do I think of The Rise of Skywalker? I gotta be honest, guys. I actually really liked it. I know I'm probably gonna get a lot of hate for saying this, and because of that, I might as well...
brace for impact.
But I'm gonna try to explain it as best as I can. You guys know how I feel about the new Star Wars era. I love The Force Awakens. Rogue One was okay. Last Jedi was a very conflicting movie, and to be honest, pretty disappointing. And Solo, I didn't think was that bad. You could go watch my reviews if you want to know my full thoughts. But this current era of Star Wars has been a really rocky ride. And J.J. Abrams coming back to direct, I thought was a little too safe of a choice, but at the same time, he understands Star Wars. To be honest, I think he should have done all 3 movies, but that's besides the point. But the way The Last Jedi turned out, it basically soured my mood on this whole trilogy, because I've heard other people say this, that The Last Jedi was basically an alternate first act. Now we have a third film that's trying to figure out how to make a conclusion. And I'm not gonna go into all the details about how, oh, they should have done this, they should have done that. J.J. Abrams and Rian Johnson should have been on the same page. They should have had a plan. I get it, guys. I get it. Nothing you say about that is going to surprise me. But on second viewing though, I was able to solidify my thoughts on it. And I would say that as far as the trilogy is concerned, this is my second favorite behind Force Awakens. And going into the movie, I wasn't really surprised by the way it turned out, because it was basically J.J. Abrams trying to do damage control, and based on the reviews that I was hearing before I saw it, this movie pretty much retcons a lot of The Last Jedi, or polishes up some of the stuff that fans didn't really like. And even all the negatives I have with it, it's with an understanding of, well, what else did you expect? This is J.J. Abrams trying to make up for lost time, which the first 20 minutes, it is a lot to pack in, and it's really rocky. It's basically what J.J. would have done had he done Episode 8. You see Rey training on this planet where the Resistance base is at. Leia's now her new master. Poe and Finn are on this adventure to receive information from an informant that they're relying on. Meanwhile, Kylo Ren, due to this new message that Emperor Palpatine is back from the dead, he decides to go out into the unknown regions of Exegol, and he discovers that Palpatine is alive. How? It's never really explained. But it's also revealed that he created Supreme Leader Snoke as a pawn in order to control the First Order and distract the rest of the galaxy away from his actual plan. So as the Resistance is trying to figure out what to do about the Emperor, Rey realizes from studying the Jedi text that she saved from Luke, that Luke was actually looking for a wayfinder some time ago. And she, Finn, and Poe decide to go off and find the wayfinder and figure out exactly what the First Order is up to. Speaking of Leia, as we all know, Carrie Fisher passed away a couple years ago. The filmmakers implemented unused footage from The Force Awakens and The Last Jedi and incorporated into this film. To be honest, I think this is probably the best way they could have gone about it, and I think for the most part, it actually worked. Save for a couple of shots where you can tell, that doesn't look that great. But to be honest, I didn't really expect it to be that easy. I thought it was actually very classy and very respectful of her memory. And I'm not really that all surprised that Leia is actually training Rey, because they do show later on in a flashback that she has experienced some Jedi training under Luke. And And they've also explored it in the books as well, but the movies, up until now, hadn't really addressed it, even though they showcase that she is Force sensitive. At least from what I can tell, she's basically continuing the training where Luke left off with Rey. So Rey and the rest of the gang go off to the planet called Pisana in the Millennium Falcon to look for an ally who can help them with the Sith Wayfinder. And speaking of the rest of the gang, I really like the chemistry between Rey, Finn, and Poe. I'm so glad we finally got to see that. Unfortunately, yeah, it is a bit too late in this trilogy, but still, from what we see, I really liked it. It feels just like the original trilogy with Luke, Leia, and Han. And I'm gonna try not to get on my soapbox about Rian Johnson too much, but this is what he should have done in the last movie. And the light speed skipping, or whatever that's called, where Poe skips from one area to the next while they're being pursued by TIE fighters, that was so much fun. A classic Star Wars. Now, as I said earlier, the first 20 minutes are pretty rocky. It's once they go out on the search to look for the Wayfinder, I think the movie smooths out very considerably. J.J. Abrams knows how to keep things moving. He doesn't waste any time, but at the same time, though, I would not have been upset if this was a 3-hour movie. I mean, Avengers Endgame was about 3 hours long. I think if he added an extra 20 minutes, I wouldn't have complained, and I don't think a lot of people would have either. Kylo Ren and Rey are continuing to fight with each other through their Force connection, where he's taunting her about her parents being nobodies, and she fires back saying that, "I can see through the cracks in your mask. You can't stop seeing your father wherever you go." By the way, I like the new design of Kylo Ren's helmet. The cracks on his helmet, very symbolic, to show you just how close he is to going back to the good side completely. Oh yeah, and we also get to see the Knights of Ren in this one. We saw a glimpse of them in The Force Awakens when Rey had that Force vision. I didn't really have a stake in seeing the Knights of Ren. They had neat designs, they looked scary, but I honestly didn't really care about whether or not they were going to show up. Great to see them, but yeah, you get what I mean. The dynamic between Kylo Ren and Rey is probably the strongest point in this movie, and I would say probably throughout the whole trilogy. Him asking, "Why didn't you take my hand? You would have killed me. I know who your parents are. I know your story. They were nobodies because they chose to be." Pretty obvious jab at Rian Johnson, and J.J. Abrams is trying to rectify that. Could you say that this movie tries too hard to course correct things? Yeah, maybe to some degree, and in fact, Rose doesn't really get that much screen time. Similar to Jar Jar Binks in one specific way. Took up so much screen time in The Phantom Menace, and the following two movies didn't really get a whole lot to do. And I feel bad for saying that because Kelly Marie Tran looked like she was really excited to be in Star Wars, and if they just gave her better stuff to do, I don't think I would have complained as much. So the First Order spots them, and then they get rescued by this certain gentleman who's in disguise, and this person turns out to be Lando Calrissian himself, played by Billy D. Williams. And Lando reveals that he and Luke were actually searching for the Wayfinder many years before, looking for a Sith informant named Ochi. They found the ship, but it was abandoned, and as a result, they stopped looking for it as the trail went cold. Then certain shenanigans ensue and they find the ship. Rey recognizes the ship, the same one that her parents left on. And along the way, they discover a dagger that could hold the location to the Sith Wayfinder. Then Kylo Ren shows up in his TIE fighter and flies right towards Rey, which if you've seen the first teaser trailer, oh my god. That was amazing. And speaking of the action in here is just perfectly classic Star Wars. J.J. Abrams, I had no doubt that he was going to make the movie entertaining, and he has a great way of directing action. And going into the film, I thought to myself, alright, at the very least, this is going to be an entertaining spectacle. And in that respect, it didn't disappoint. And Abrams is also known for his intensity, does the exact same thing in this one. That shot of the TIE fighter coming right at Rey, and Rey starts running away from it, and then she flips and cuts the wing off. Just like the one scene in Avengers Infinity War when all the Wakandans start charging and Captain America goes shoo! I love intensity like that. Oh god. But then Finn calls out to Rey saying that Chewie's been taken prisoner by the First Order, so she uses Force powers to grab the transport that he's supposedly on. Then Kylo Ren starts using his Force power, and it becomes a push and shove tug of war kind of thing, and then Rey accidentally shoots out Force lightning, blowing up the transport, supposedly killing Chewie by accident. And there's a moment that we've seen in some of the recent TV spots where she looks down at her hand going, "My god, what did I do?" She has moments where she's scared. She's not a completely perfect woman. Similar thing that she did in The Force Awakens, where it took 2 or 3 shots to kill the Stormtrooper, and she went, "How did I do that?" And she has a similar thing when she pulls the Jedi mind trick on the Stormtrooper. So they take off in Ochi's old ship, and they head off to a planet called Kijimi to run into an old contact from Poe Dameron named Zori Bliss, who's played by Kerry Russell, because they have to go to this certain tech called Babu Frick, who's a really hilarious addition to Star Wars. They have to reprogram 3PO's memory bank in order for him to translate the dagger. But in order to do that, they have to wipe his memory completely. They're able to get it by learning that this other Wayfinder is on the forest moon of Endor in the Death Star wreckage. Another thing I like about this sequence is not only 3PO's line where he says, "Taking one last look, sir, at my friends." I know people will complain that, oh yeah, you only knew them for 5 minutes. Well, regardless of that, it actually got me a little bit because, love or hate 3PO, this guy's been around for a long time and I didn't want to see him die. But it also gives Poe Dameron a bit of a backstory because up until now, we didn't really know that much about him, but we do learn in this movie that he used to be a spice runner, and he left Zori Bliss's gang in order to join the Resistance. And then through a conversation that he has with her, he shares that he doesn't really believe that everybody else is coming despite sending the message out to the galaxy, and she says, no, they win by making you think that you're alone. Once you rely on each other, then we can win. But then they head to Kylo Ren's Star Destroyer after Rey discovers that Chewie's still alive. As they sneak aboard the ship, Finn and Poe go rescue Chewie, but then they get captured by the First Order. Rey sneaks into Kylo Ren's quarters and sees the burned up Darth Vader mask. And through the Force connection, she and Kylo Ren battle it out, and she starts to get visions of her parents leaving her on Jakku. Then later on, Kylo Ren shows up on his ship, encounters her in the hangar. And the biggest reveal comes in, she is Palpatine's granddaughter. Is it out of left field? Yeah, a little bit, but looking back on the other two movies, especially The Force Awakens, it's pretty clear that Rey was more than what we saw on the surface. I personally would have preferred if she was a Skywalker by blood, but considering the corner that J.J. Abrams was put in after Last Jedi, this was probably the best alternative they could have gone with. Was it planned from the beginning? Yeah, maybe. Maybe it was one of the ideas that he was bouncing around in his head, but I think he was more toying with the idea that she could be a Skywalker by blood, because why else did that lightsaber call out to her? You could say that maybe it's because she was destined to take on the name of Skywalker. Yeah, probably, but I think it's a little bit of a stretch, considering that Maz said that that was Luke's lightsaber, and his father's, now it's calling to you. And I'll admit, I didn't really like the fact that she was a Palpatine at first, even though I was pretty shocked by that, but on second viewing, I actually grew to accept it. Again, my preference, I would have preferred if she was Han and Leia's kid. But the fact that she is a granddaughter of Palpatine, it does explain why she's so powerful. Because of her lineage, she's able to inherit that Force power from her grandfather. I don't want to pat myself on the back here, but I've been saying for the last 4 years that she was not a nobody. And people kept telling me that I was wrong. Well, now that we know that she is somebody of important lineage, all's I gotta say,
she is! I knew she would be! She had to be! She had to be!
So they head to Endor to look through the Death Star wreckage, and they run into these locals led by Jannah, who's played by Naomi Ackie, I believe. And we also get a bit of clarification on why Finn decided to break away from the First Order. Because it turns out that Jannah was a stormtrooper in the First Order. She was drafted, just like he was. She and her group of allies were ordered to open fire on innocent villagers, and they all said no. So she's a deserter, just like Finn is. And we also learn that he's Force sensitive, which also explains how he was able to wield a lightsaber like he did. Not perfectly, but he did have some skill with it. And it's another way of simplifying the Force, saying that it's an instinct, a gut feeling. It's not a midi-chlorian count. Seriously, people, not everything about the prequels was good. Again, I wish that we learned a little bit about that in The Last Jedi instead of having Finn going out on this adventure with Rose. Thank God, though, that J.J. Abrams managed to put it back on track. So Rey goes through the Death Star wreckage, and we get to see a little bit of familiar imagery, like the Imperial shuttle in one shot, Stormtrooper armor lying on the ground, TIE fighter wreckage, and the Emperor's throne room. And as she's looking at the chair that he sat in, we hear this little bit like, it's almost kind of like hearing Parseltongue from the Harry Potter series. And she has an encounter with the vision of Dark Rey, which I really like seeing that, but unfortunately, it was a little too quick for me. I wish there was more of that, but it shows you just what Rey could become if she allowed her lineage to decide what she was gonna do. And another thing to go back earlier, after she supposedly killed Chewie, she tells Finn, I had a vision of him on the Sith throne, and me. The music in that scene by John Williams and Daisy Ridley's acting, for me, I found it actually really haunting because I really like this character quite a bit. I know a lot of fans don't like her, but I find her to be a very endearing character personally, and a really pure-hearted kind of person. And I'm a sucker for pure-hearted protagonists like Captain America, Spider-Man, or Luke Skywalker, and in this case, Rey. You don't really want to see a person like that become the bad guy. At least for me, it doesn't sit well. Then Kylo Ren shows up and they have a lightsaber duel on the wreckage of the Death Star amongst a raging ocean, which I think is probably the opposite of the lightsaber fight between Obi-Wan and Anakin on Mustafar. Hot fiery lava versus cool water. I'm just saying, parallels. Meanwhile, on the Resistance base, Leia senses the battle happening, and she decides to make one last-ditch effort with all the Force power that she has left to get her son to come back to the good side. And she quietly says Ben's name, and then she dies with R2 right by her side, bringing it all full circle. Rey senses Leia's death after impaling Ben, and she uses Force healing powers to heal him. And the next thing that happens, Kylo Ren has a vision of Han Solo in the way that he wished would have happened in The Force Awakens. And after that, on first viewing, when you hear Han say, "Hey kid," and I went, "What?" Oh my god, I should have told me where this movie was going. And if you remember from Force Awakens when he said, "I know what I have to do, but I don't know if I have the strength to do it, will you help me?" Basically he was saying, I know I have to kill you, but I don't know if I can do it. In this version, it's the opposite effect. He throws the lightsaber out into the ocean, showing that it's something he wished he would have done in the first place. And the conversation ends with him going, "Dad? I know." Don't look at me. Don't look at me. I'm sorry. As usual, I'm losing my mind. So Rey arrives on Ahch-To, destroys the TIE fighter in an effort to isolate herself from the rest of the galaxy, heartbroken over Leia's death and ashamed of her heritage. And then she throws the lightsaber into the wreckage, and then all of a sudden a hand catches it. Luke as a Force ghost. And he comes out saying, a Jedi's weapon deserves more respect. Another FU to Rian Johnson. So during this conversation, Rey tells Luke that she's going to isolate herself, but then he responds with, "I was wrong. It was fear that kept me here." He's back to the Luke Skywalker that we all know and love. That arc from The Last Jedi up until now is finally complete. I know a lot of fans don't like what they did with Luke in The Last Jedi, but for me, I thought it made perfect sense. And you saw glimpses of Luke throughout his performance in that movie. It was just a heartbroken and jaded soul. Now he's back to the Luke Skywalker that we all remember, just wiser and more experienced. Mark Hamill, once again, knocks it out of the park. He's my favorite character in this whole series. But he also reveals that he knew that she was a Palpatine, which explains why he was reticent to train her in the first place. And that Leia also knew that Rey was a Palpatine. And Luke tells Rey that some things are stronger than blood. She didn't tell you because she saw your heart, your spirit. You are not your grandfather. You're better than him. Then he gives Rey the lightsaber that Leia used during their training that they had many years ago. So he gives her Leia's lightsaber, and he lifts the X-Wing out of the ocean, finally rectifying something that he couldn't do in Empire Strikes Back, lifting the X-Wing out of the water. So Rey takes off in Luke's X-Wing and flies to Exegol to confront the Emperor. The remains of the Rebel fleet, with Lando Calrissian and the Falcon, go out to confront the Final Order. This is Palpatine's plan. He was actually planning a failsafe when he created the Empire. The First Order was just the first step in resurrecting the Empire. The Final Order is a much more stronger version of the Galactic Empire, with Star Destroyers with enough firepower to wipe out an entire planet, just like the Death Star. Speaking of the Emperor, this was the one thing that I was really nervous about. And I'll admit, on first viewing, his inclusion was a bit iffy on my end. J.J. Abrams has publicly said that he was planning on the Emperor coming back. JJ, come on. You're not fooling me. Snoke was your bad guy. It's just that Rian Johnson, again, threw all that out the window. Regardless of any of that, it's nice to see Emperor Palpatine back one more time. And in terms of the saga, him being the overarching villain makes sense to me. And they are pulling a bit from the expanded universe lore, where he does come back from the dead, whether it's through cloning or his spirit possessing another body. Now, as far as him coming back from the dead, I wish they would have explained that because they don't really give any clarity to it. I'm not asking for them to spoon feed us, but he does say something that he said to Anakin in Revenge of the Sith. The dark side contains the pathway to many powers that are unnatural. And then when Kylo Ren says to him earlier, "No, you're dead. You're supposed to be dead." And he said, "I've died once before." And as he said to Anakin in Revenge of the Sith, to cheat death is a power that only one has achieved. But if we work together, I know that we can discover the secret. So I think it made it a little bit more clear on second viewing and noticing the implications of the other movies. It does allude to the fact that he might come back from the dead if he wants to. And I buy the fact that Emperor Palpatine would create the Final Order as like a backup plan, because as Jack Bauer says in 24, the first rule of engagement is that you have a contingency plan. Now, my preference as to how they could have explained the Emperor being in this movie, instead of him being back through this dead body, I think they could have used like a wayfinder as like a portal in order to have his Force spirit come back and try to find a new body to possess, so that way he could come back from the dead. Had that been the case, I don't think most people would have complained about that. Still, him surviving the explosion on the Death Star, I don't know, I thought that was a huge leap in logic. Yeah, we are talking about a universe where you can manipulate a powerful energy field to do whatever you want, and laser swords and laser guns. You have to suspend your disbelief on some level, but still, there could have been other better ways to make the Emperor come back. All that aside though, the layers and implications of Rey confronting her grandfather, I think makes a really great dynamic. And it's basically, if Hitler were to come back from the dead, and his grandchild were to be his only chance to help him come back, that's Hitler's grandchild basically saying, whoa, 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 you are not coming back. No chance in hell. So the Resistance fleet arrives to take out the Star Destroyers, still trying to hope that the rest of the galaxy is going to show up to help them. Unfortunately, it doesn't look like that's going to happen. Oh my god, I completely forgot about General Hux. Okay, it turns out that he's the spy in the First Order, and he reveals, I don't care if you win. I just want Kylo Ren to lose. A little bit last second, but I do like that General Hux isn't a completely bad guy after all, and I think it also kind of explains why he didn't look so comfortable in the first two movies to begin with. The one high-ranking General Pride, he should have been the main First Order officer the entire time. Very reminiscent of Grand Moff Tarkin in the original, but numerous amounts of ships in the galaxy, including Zori Bliss and the Falcon, they all show up to take out the Final Order fleet. And with the help of Ben Solo, Rey fights back against Emperor Palpatine, who for a moment looks like he's about to destroy the entire fleet. And with the help of the voices of past Jedi Knights, Rey is able to summon the courage to fight back the Emperor for good. And taking both lightsabers and repelling the Force lightning that he shoots at her and vaporizes him into dust. Speaking of those Jedi voices, I love the fact that they got so many people to lend a hand in that. Liam Neeson as Qui-Gon, Ewan McGregor as Obi-Wan, Sam Jackson as Mace Windu, even Hayden Christensen as Anakin Skywalker. I was expecting Anakin Skywalker to have some kind of role in here. I heard some rumors saying that he was going to be a Force ghost in some capacity. I personally wouldn't have minded that because I think it would have been a nice little tie-in for the prequel fans. But on the other hand, had they included him in that form, I guarantee you the fans would have said it's too fan service-like. You know. Speaking of that, I heard a lot of people say that this movie undermines Anakin killing the Emperor in Return of the Jedi, saying that Rey is now the Chosen One. No, she's not. She's not the Chosen One. Nobody comes out and says that she's the Chosen One. Not in this movie, not in The Last Jedi, and not even The Force Awakens. I understand what people are saying, and I get why people are upset about that, but for myself, Anakin, for all intents and purposes, did kill the Emperor. The Emperor did say in the other movies that cheat death is a power only one has achieved, so it doesn't really surprise me that this guy would find a way to come back from the dead. And he did die. As he said to Kylo Ren, I did die once before. And most importantly, when Vader killed the Emperor, he not only brought balance to the Force, but he also saved his son's life. His son Luke got through to his shell and was able to show him that there was still good in him all along. So in a way, yeah, he brought balance to the Force, but most importantly, he saved his son. And plus, realistically speaking, there's always going to be a new threat that pops up in the future. There might be some peace for a certain amount of time, but eventually there's going to be a new threat. I get what people are saying, but for me, I don't think it undermines Return of the Jedi. Rey is not the Chosen One. They don't say that she's the Chosen One. They don't allude to it. And the Emperor is not technically back in this movie. Yes, he is back in a way, but he's on the verge of coming back. It's Rey, his grandchild, that stops him from coming back for good. So as far as I'm concerned, it doesn't undermine Return of the Jedi for me. So yeah, she kills Palpatine, and she ends up dying herself. And Ben Solo, who fell into this hole, climbs out, and then uses his life force to resurrect her back from the dead. And unfortunately, they share a kiss. Did not need to see that. It was an obvious point to appease the Reylo fans. The moment that she touched his face and locked eyes with him, I knew exactly what was gonna happen. I went, oh God. No. Don't kiss him. No. Ah! And girls in the theater were all giddy and whatnot. What'd you expect? But he brought her back from the dead, he's redeemed, and he ends up dying and becomes one with the Force. Resistance wins, the Rebellion wins, Chewie gets the medal that Leia had, and Lando supposedly takes Jannah under his wings when she says that she doesn't have a family. There were rumors that she was actually Lando's daughter. I feel like that's what they were alluding to, but they don't say it out loud. I'm kind of glad that they didn't, but at the same time, I kind of wish that they did, because one of the many core things about Star Wars is that it's about family. And people in Star Wars tend to be related to each other in some fashion, so it wouldn't have really surprised me. So the movie ends with Rey arriving on Tatooine at the Lars homestead where Luke grew up. She has both Leia and Luke's lightsabers, buries them in the dirt, and reveals her lightsaber to be yellow. And a local walks by saying that nobody's lived here for years. Who are you? I'm Rey. Rey Skywalker. She says that with the two Force ghosts of Luke and Leia looking at her from a distance, in a way saying like, it's okay. You can take our name. The fact that a Palpatine takes on the Skywalker name, giant FU to the Emperor. I also like the fact that despite her heritage, she was able to see the kind of family that she would have wanted. Luke and Leia were the family that she never had. You don't have to be blood related to somebody to consider them family. And I liked it. I thought it was nice. And then it ends with her in BB-8 looking out on the twin sunset with the binary sunset theme playing. So those are my thoughts on Star Wars The Rise of Skywalker. It's not a perfect movie. I didn't expect it to be, considering what Rian Johnson did with The Last Jedi. It was just exactly what I expected it to be. I let go of all my expectations and just went along for the ride, and I felt very satisfied with it personally. Is it the greatest ending in the saga? Well, I don't think it was ever really going to be, considering how Star Wars fandom is so toxic nowadays. And trust me, I've read every single review for this movie that I could find. To be honest, it doesn't really surprise me. And the fan service that's in here with Endor, Cloud City, and all the other stuff, if there's any time for you to use fan service in Star Wars, it's now. Because this is the final movie of the saga. If you didn't have any kind of fan service, okay. They want something familiar, they hate it. They want something original, they hate it. They want something in the middle, they hate it. And especially with this trilogy, them not having a concrete plan, trust me guys, I get it, I do. I'm not disagreeing with you, but I'm not gonna waste my time crying about it because the damage is done. There's no going back now. And if you don't like these new movies, I totally understand that. That's not really gonna surprise me. I mean, I've dealt with different opinions on movies all my life. Especially starting this channel, I get various opinions from people all the time. I'm just saying that the fandom reaction, I just think is completely, ridiculously, humongously stupid. And I know that we're gonna go through a rinse and repeat thing with any future Star Wars project. And The Mandalorian's probably gonna get crapped on saying that it ruined Star Wars, ruined their childhood because of some direction that they don't like it's taking. And the next trilogy that's coming up, which I guess is Rian Johnson's trilogy, it's gonna happen all over again. Fans are gonna hate it. It's not the original, it's not Empire Strikes Back. They're gonna bully the actors and the filmmakers, so on and so forth, and our childhoods will continue to get raped. To all those people out there, if you're watching this, please don't do that again. But I know you're going to anyway. For me, Star Wars Episode 9 does pull off what it's trying to do to the point where I'm like, oh, all right. I'll give you a slide on some of the other stuff. I understand that J.J. Abrams had a lot to make up for, and to those people who are complaining that it's 2 movies in 1, well, what else were you expecting to happen? If anything, you shouldn't be mad at this movie. What you should be mad at is Rian Johnson with The Last Jedi. That's the movie that messed this whole thing up. Not The Rise of Skywalker. The Last Jedi is the one that messed it up. And also the fact that the studio didn't have a concrete roadmap, but I digress. So going forward with Star Wars, it's really bittersweet that the saga has ended because Star Wars has meant a lot to me ever since I was 6 years old. I mean, I can't emphasize that enough. And people who know me, they can testify to that. I think that Star Wars can sustain without the Skywalker saga. Maybe not quite as strong, but with The Mandalorian, I think it shows you that you don't have to be restricted to just the Skywalkers in order to be successful. And I think that any future Star Wars films following up, whether it's The Old Republic or Rian Johnson's new trilogy, whatever that's gonna be about, I think that Star Wars can continue on successfully. It's not gonna be the same without the Skywalker saga, but you know what? For all intents and purposes, I'm glad that I was alive to see that happen. I certainly didn't take it for granted as a lot of people did. They're complaining that there's too much Star Wars needs to die, needs to end. Guys, like it or not, Star Wars is so popular that it's not going to go away. Either get on board with it or spend the rest of your lives hating on these new movies because it's not The Empire Strikes Back. Going forward, I think that Star Wars is going to be okay. Those are my thoughts on The Rise of Skywalker and the recent Star Wars films. So, what are your thoughts on Episode 9? Do you love it, like it, think it's alright, or do you hate it? Whatever the case is, comment below and tell me your thoughts, and I will see you all very soon.